I'm going to be talking to you about AngularJS tonight. So by show of hands, how many of you have heard of AngularJS? That's awesome. I would expect that at the JavaScript meetup here, right? So how many of you actually have used Angular? Man, all right, well, my introductory level talk here, you guys might be teaching me something. I saw about half the hands that come up for people who used Angular. So for those of you who haven't used it, I hope you get to see something that will make you want to use it. And for those of you who do use it, then hopefully I show you something. Maybe not, but we'll see. And those of you that are in the back, you'll have to tell me if you can see the screen from back there, because I'm going to be doing some live coding, and it's going to be kind of small, so good time to move up. All right, so let me just start out. Try to make this as big as I can here. So for those of you who haven't used Angular, I'll just tell you a little bit of overview about Angular, and then I'm going to go into the live coding, as I said. So what is Angular? Angular is a structural framework that's going to help us build dynamic web apps. A lot of y'all have probably used jQuery, and you can use jQuery to do things like, make your UI very dynamic and things. But you'll find that the more complicated your front end gets, the more you need structure to that. Otherwise, you run into just kind of a mess of spaghetti code. I started out in jQuery and came to Angular through Backbone, another front end framework. And after I got to Angular, there was just no going back to anything else. I found that it's really made my front end clean, and I'm able to get such rich functionality, but very simply. So why is Angular better than some other framework? For me, it's worked great, and I can't say that it's the right tool for every job, but so far, it's done very well for me. People have different coding styles and things. For me, Angular works really well. For you, maybe one of the others works better. There's just so many front-end frameworks out there to use. And a couple things I noticed about Angular that drew me to it were, first of all, instead of trying to create extensions around HTML, it actually extends the HTML vocabulary. So Angular allows you to create or use things called directives. And I'll show you later that it's basically just a new HTML tag or a new attribute or something like that, and it gives HTML new life. So instead of saying, hey, I want to loop through something and print out all these values, you normally have like a for each loop. We won't see that in Angular. You'll see actually these directives or tags that will actually be able to modify the behavior of an HTML tag to do something like you would do in a loop. So I really like that. I also like that it does automatic binding between the models and views. I use things like Backbone, and I didn't get that. Backbone was comfortable at first because coming from jQuery, I noticed oh hey, I've got all this structure, and then I get to still modify the DOM with jQuery. I kind of liked it at first. But like I said, once I got to Angular, I just realized being free from having to do all that data binding myself just made coding so much faster, and it made the end result cleaner. So that's more maintainable to me. And also, Angular is backed by Google, which to me says a lot. I don't think it's going to, be here today, gone tomorrow. And I actually experimented with a few other small JavaScript frameworks that are gone now, And so I don't want to keep having that experience. I think Angular is going to be around. I noticed that it's gaining steam, and just to kind of give you guys an overview, if we look at Stack Overflow questions, this doesn't necessarily represent popularity, but to me, it shows how many people are using it. So if you look, AngularJS, at the time that I made this, had over 12,000 questions, Backbone at 11,000, and then down from there with Dojo, Ember, Knockout, Yui. So you can see, maybe just Angular's the hardest to use if you love most questions. I personally don't think that's the case. I think that this is showing that, Angular is already becoming more popular than these others, and some of them have been around longer. So, with that said, I want to just start showing you guys some code. I don't really like slides, so I like to just show you things. And if you have questions as I go through this, I want you to ask. I might even ask you guys some questions. So pay attention. Maybe we'll come to a point where I'll hit a bug or something. You'll be like, oh hey, I know. Maybe you don't have to raise your hand, just shout it out. So. By the way, all of this stuff is on GitHub. My consulting company name is Gizmovation. So if you go github.com/Gizmovation, you'll be able to come to my repositories, and you'll find this in TechUp HQ events, and this is actually under the SA Web Dev Meetup. I did this presentation a couple months ago there. So I would start out by just copying this here and pasting it in my text editor. I'll repaste this, so you know I'm starting from the beginning. And I don't know if you guys recognize this, but this is Brackets open source editor from Adobe. If you guys haven't used it, you should check it out. It has some cool features. I use it sometimes. I really like Sublime, but I use this for live demonstrations because it has like live refresh with the browser, which I find unique. So this is a really bare bones Angular app. So let's just look at it and say, hey, what's different about this than just like a regular HTML page? So the first thing I want you to notice is this ng app up here. So this is telling Angular that, hey, we actually want you to initialize yourself on this page. We're going to run Angular here. And how's that going to happen? Well, we've got Angular actually included in the page here. And down here, you can see this kind of looks like something different, this ng model. I was telling you about how Angular uses directives. Well, this is an example of a directive. Angular has a lot of built-in directives, but you can also build your own. And they can be attributes, or they can be tags themselves. And they really let you add so much rich functionality. So to start off, this is really totally the basic Angular app. I mean, I don't even have a controller in this page, which I'm going to talk to you about in just a minute. But with just this here, you can see I've got an input, and it says ng-model equals name. So this is telling Angular that I'm going to bind to this variable called name, and whatever is input in this text box, that within Angular will have that same value. And then down here, I've got an h3, and I say hello name, and you see these curly braces. This is what Angular is going to use to say, okay, hey, I'm going to parse what's in here. I'm just going to parse it as a JavaScript expression. I'll show you what that means in a second. So let's just type this in, type something in here. So I say hello JS meetup, and there it is. So Angular is taking the value of this, and it's outputting it here. And as I go through this, I just want you to think about, like, if I was using jQuery, what would I have to do? And by the time we get to the end of this demo, you're going to be like, oh man, this would be a mess. So it'll look really clean in here, trust me. So I said that this is just a JavaScript expression in here. So let me kind of show you an example of that. If I just say name or, and then I say world, and I save that, you can see that since name doesn't have a value, it says, okay, well, name doesn't have a value, so name or world will show world. As I start typing in here, you can see that now name has a value, and then it's going to use that instead. So that's just an example of how the Angular tags are processed. It's just a JavaScript expression. So it won't be that boring. So let's go a step further here. I'll show you another directive called ng-hide. So we see ng-model here, which we know binds a variable to what's going to be Angular scope, which we'll understand in just a minute. I'm going to create an input here, type equals checkbox, and I'm going to say ng-model equals hi hello. So I'm saying, hey, here's a checkbox, and I'm going to bind this to a variable called hi hello. And then down here, I could say ng-hide equals hi hello. I'll save that, and let's actually put a little label here. All right. So if I check this box, then this hi hello is going to become true. ng-hide is going to evaluate that and say, oh, hi hello is true, I should hide. So if I check this, you can see, just like that, now I'm able to actually show and hide this element. And so the inverse of ng-hide is ng-show, which is also available, but I'm not going to show you that one. So the next thing I want to do is I want to take, and instead of going just totally basic, I'm going to actually make a controller in here. And that's going to introduce us to scope in Angular and what that really means. So to create a controller, I'm just going to say our controller equals function, and Angular uses dependency injection to inject values into your functions. And I'm going to inject scope, which Angular provides. Let's go in here. And so now I've created this function, and Angular doesn't know that I'm actually using it as a controller. So I need to tell Angular somehow I'm going to use this function as a controller. So I'm going to come up here to this div, and I'm going to say ng-controller, another directive, equals the name of my variable down there, which results in my function. So I'll save that. And now I can do things like, what if I want a default name to show up when I load my page? Well, that would be very easy to do if I say, take my scope and look for name. So up in your DOM here, when I bind to ng model, I don't need to provide scope because I'm in that scope. But in my controller, like I pass in scope, the scope becomes whatever the is below the DOM of the ng controller directive. Does that make sense? And then it's going to go in there and set things. So here, I can say my name equals Chris. And if I save that, now automatically Angular is saying, okay, here's the controller, it's defined down here, let's assign the name, and so now I've got a default value. All right. Any questions so far? Well, you guys are following good. All right. So now we're going to clean this up a little bit, and I'm going to try to make a list of meetups. And by the end, I want to be able to add meetups, I want to be able to remove meetups, I want to be able to do some validation, all those kind of things. So we'll start building that. So let's take this out here, and we'll say scope meetups, and we'll make that an array, and we'll say we've got a PHP meetup, we've got a JavaScript meetup, web dev meetup, and that'll be good for now. And then we'll come up here and modify our form a little bit. So let's say meetups, which is so cool that we have so many now. We had like one a couple months ago, and now we have like 5. All right, and I can get rid of a lot of this stuff. Let's make this be a search, which we're going to implement a little later. Let's keep it around for efficiency. Get rid of that. Okay. Okay, so now I have modified my controller. So I've got an array in scope that's called meetups. And up here, you can see I've got my nice heading there. I've got a search box that's not doing anything. And then I've got this unordered list with nothing in it, right? So as I was talking about at the very beginning, Angular just is extending the HTML vocabulary. So we're already seeing how ng-show, ng-hide, all these directives are letting us do stuff in HTML that wouldn't be there normally. I also said that we could do things like what a for each loop would do. The directive to do something like that is called ng-repeat. So on my list item here, I'm going to say ng-repeat, and I'm just going to say for meetup in meetups. And inside, I want to say, hey, show me the meetup. So by doing that, now Angular is going to look in my scope, it's going to find meetups, and it's going to loop through that and give me a variable meetup, just as a for each loop would do. And I'm going to actually be able to echo that out just like that. So that looks pretty clean, right, in the HTML? Like, just really, I look at that and I'm like, man, this is sweet. This is why I like Angular. So.
Hey, Chris.
Hey.
How critical is the naming of the singular in the plural?
This is the syntax for an ng-repeat. It's like whatever you want the variable inside this scope to be, and whatever your scope variable is. And there's other things like when you try to build select boxes and things, there's some fairly complicated syntax that you can get into, so you can control like what's the ID of this select box versus the value of things. But for ng-repeat, it looks just like a for each loop. So it's just initializing this as a variable within the scope of the ng-repeat.
But the singular vernacular is not required. I mean,
No,
call
like
that
if we
whatever you
said,
want,
if we said like,
as long as they match. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
still gonna be the same.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you for clarifying. So, since we've got this far, like, let's make our search box do something. This is pretty cool to me because it's just so simple. If I just say, type to filter based on the search, and I save that, now if I start typing in here, you can see that it's already filtering my list, just based on that. I mean, I don't know, if you're doing this in jQuery, and it's painful. So, okay, let's take this and expand it a little further. So right now I've just got meetups, and it's just a basic array. But let's make this an array of objects. So I'll come down in here, and I'll say the name of the group, and say members. Oh man, wrapping on the screen here. If I hit enter. I'm sorry, it's such a small screen, it's going to wrap. All right. There we go. All right, so we're going to go more of these. JavaScript will give you 200 members. Maybe in a couple months, right? All right. So before I save this, you see what we've got now. We have an array of objects, and these objects have a name and a member count, right? So, anybody have any idea what's going to happen if I save this? No? All right, so we'll see together. All right, look at that. So, Angular is going to just repeat exactly what I have there. And since I haven't said, hey, look at a specific item on this object, it's just going to actually give me the object out. So, instead of saying, hey, let's echo meetup, we'll say meetup.name. We save it, and there we go. And so now we want to put out the members too. So let's do that. Say that, and there we go. We've got our name and the members. And even cooler yet, the search searches on all of the attributes of the object. So if I start typing in the numbers or the names, it searches for both. Pretty sweet, right? Okay, so let's see. We've got our filters, we've got our meetups object format. All right, let's introduce another directive that's going to let us add things to this list, and that's called ng-repeat. I'm sorry, not ng-repeat, we did that. ng-click. Let's try that.
Very ironic.
Thank you. All right, so let's do this. We're going to copy some of this here, so I don't have to type everything so many times. All right, so we're going to say meetup and members, and we'll say new meetup, new members, and we'll create a button, ng-click equals add meetup, which doesn't exist, but we'll create. All right. So our HTML looks good. We've got an input box for a meetup name. We've got an input box for members, and then we've got a button that says add meetup. So let's make this do something. So we told our button you're going to be able to do an ng-click and add meetup. So let's actually take and define that down here in our controller. We can do that by saying scope dot add meetup equals function. And inside there, what we want to do is we just simply want to take whatever we've got in our input boxes, and we want to add something to our array of meetups. So let's do that. We'll say scope.meetups.push, and here, I'll just take one of these, paste that in there, and do my best to make this look pretty for y'all since it's so jammed up in here. Okay, so if we did this just the way it is, it's just going to push another PHP group on there, but we don't want to do that. We actually want to specify our group. So as you see, I've got new meetup and new members tied into my scope. So I can say scope.new meetup, and then I can say scope.new members. If I save that, the hope is that I can come over here and I can say, hey, we've got a Python, and they've got 123 members, and I can add that. And look at that. Add meetup function updated my meetups array in scope, and Angular said, hey, something changed here. Let's update your DOM automatically. So this is the power of the automatic data mining. Like, if you were doing this in jQuery or something else, you're going to have to like be adding things to the DOM. Your state is going to be maintained in the DOM. And like, that didn't scare me like a couple years ago, but today, after seeing like this stuff, it's like, it scares me now. I'm like, oh my goodness, how can you maintain that, you know? This just makes it so much easier. So we can add things. So let's remove things too. I mean, I don't want any of the meetups to go away, but just for the sake of being able to remove them. So I'm going to go with my ng repeat here, and we're going to add a button up here. And we'll just put an X. So if I save that, very nice, look at that. And then we're going to say ng-click again. And in here we'll say remove meetup. Now, just like that's probably not going to do much, right? Because I'm going to have to know somehow what meetup I'm actually trying to remove. Well, ng-repeat has a couple special variables it defines in there, one of them being the index. The index is the current loop index as if you initialize the counter in a for loop. It also has $first, $last, some other things. If you say, hey, on the first iteration I want to do this, on the last one I want to do that, it'll provide those in there as well. So remove meetup, let's copy this down here. How am I doing on time? They say wrap it up, so I'm working on it. All right, so we're going to say meetups, splice, index, now on 1. I'm going to pass in the index here. Save that. Let's see. That easy. Now it's modifying and able to actually remove those. I want to show you one more thing. It's going to take 2 minutes, and it's pretty sweet. So right now, when we try to add things to this, like it's just going to add empty things, right? We need to do validation. So let's quickly do that. I can take, and instead of just doing this ng-click, add meetup, I'm going to take that off of here, and I'm going to create a form. And I'm going to say A7 there. And we're going to say ng-submit, new directive. And take this down here. All right, so now I've got a form around my inputs here, and it's going to call the same function add meetup. Then I can add something like required to the end of this, and required to the end of the other. And I can even go as far as to say the type of this is number. And if we save that, if I try to add this, it's going to say, hey, wait, you haven't filled that out, so I'll put that in there, and let's put something else in here. This is, hey, you should have a number. So just that simple, now we've got validation on our form. So that's all the time I've got for tonight. Angular is super powerful. I use it every day. I really enjoy using it. I think it's great for building just very, very interactive applications on the front end, but still keeping your code clean. So I'll take any questions you guys have.
How would you unit test that?
So Angular actually has some stuff for unit testing. In terms of like being able to actually do the clicks and things, you probably have to have some other framework that would simulate those clicks. I haven't used one that does that, but you can actually do unit tests on your controllers and the functions in there.
Through the Angular framework that you comes with?
I believe so, and honestly, I don't want to say yes or no specifically. I don't have experience doing that, so. Yeah, go ahead.
So as far as clicks and stuff, that can be run Protractor. Protractor is an Angular add-on for Selenium. So it basically runs Selenium, but it adds a couple of things that target Angular specific stuff. And then Angular is really great about unit testing. They have the dependency injection that you mentioned as far as like scope and stuff. You can do that through Angular. There's a book out there like building web applications with AngularJS and mastering web application development with AngularJS. Yeah, it's really great as far as unit testing goes.
Thank you, appreciate it. Any other questions?
Have you seen any performance increases or decreases with Angular versus other options?
So primarily using Chrome, no. But if you get into IE and some other things, like you can structure your code in ways that you're doing too much for Angular. Like it has like watch and things where you can say, hey, anytime this variable changes, do a bunch of other stuff. And you can get into scenarios where you've got poor performance if you're not careful. But if you watch out for that, I think you can work around it.
What are the performance characteristics on mobile?
I have not used much Angular with mobile. If anyone else in this group has experience with Angular on mobile performance,
A lot faster than reloading web page.
Just real quick, a comment. I've been reading a book about Angular from O'Reilly, and it was written by some of the engineers that created it, and it goes through some of the things that you would need to consider whenever you're writing it, like the performance implications of it. So sometimes you don't really think about what you're doing when you do certain things. So it goes over some of the specifics on how you can performance optimize that stuff, because you can really screw it over royally, and it would not perform well on mobile. So just it lets you know those type of things that you would need to consider.
excellent, thank you.